The first thing that hit me wasn't what I saw, it was what I smelled. That sharp chemical odor that burns your nostrils mixed with something far more terrible. Something I recognized from my time in war zones overseas. The smell of burning flesh. A smell you never forget once you've encountered it. My fingers gripped that steering wheel so tight I could actually hear the leather creaking under the pressure. I was turning onto Maple Grove Lane, our street, 3 full days ahead of when I was supposed to arrive home from my military deployment. The surprise homecoming I'd been planning for weeks. My name's Jake Mitchell, and I'm a Navy SEAL. Or I was, anyway. This story is about the day that changed everything for my family and me. I'd been away from home for 6 long months, half a year of separation from my wife Emma. We'd been married for 5 years, together since high school, and she was 7 months pregnant with our first baby. A little girl. We'd already picked out her name, Hope. It felt right, that name. After all the deployments, all the time apart, all the danger I'd faced, this baby represented our hope for a normal future, for a real family life. The passenger seat of my car held Emma's favorite flowers, a big bouquet of yellow roses. She always said they reminded her of sunshine, of happy days. Next to the flowers sat a fuzzy brown teddy bear with a pink bow for the baby. I'd been imagining Emma's face when I walked through that door 3 days early. The surprise, the joy, the relief. Then I saw the smoke. Thick black smoke billows up into the clear afternoon sky. Dark columns of it twisted and rose like some evil thing reaching toward the clouds. And my heart just stopped. Literally stopped beating for a second when I realized exactly where that smoke was coming from. Our house. Our beautiful white 2-story house with the blue shutters Emma had spent an entire Saturday picking out at the hardware store last year. She'd compared at least 20 different shades of blue, holding them up against the white siding in different lighting, until she found the exact perfect match. Our home was completely engulfed in flames. Orange and red fire is eating through the walls, breaking out through windows, consuming everything. I didn't even think about parking properly. Just threw the car into park right there in the middle of the street, left the door hanging wide open, engine still running. My feet hit the pavement and I was running, sprinting faster than I'd ever run in my life, faster than during any training exercise or combat situation. "Emma!" I screamed, my voice tearing raw from my throat. "Emma!" All around me, neighbors were standing in their yards like frozen statues. They had their cell phones pressed to their ears, presumably calling 911. Their mouths were moving, but nobody, not a single person, was actually moving toward the house. Nobody was trying to help. They just stood there watching our house burn, watching my world fall apart. I could hear sirens wailing somewhere in the distance, getting closer but not nearly close enough. They weren't here yet, and every second mattered. Every single second counted when my wife and unborn daughter were trapped inside that inferno. I didn't stop to think. There wasn't time for thinking, for weighing options or considering the risks. My wife was in there. My baby girl was in there. Nothing else in the entire world mattered in that moment. I kicked the front door with every ounce of strength I possessed, and it burst inward. The heat that came rolling out hit me like a solid wall, like getting hit by a truck made of fire. The temperature was unbelievable, suffocating. Flames were crawling up the walls like living creatures, spreading across the ceiling, eating through everything they touched. The smoke was so thick and black that I couldn't see more than a couple of feet in front of my face. "Emma!" I shouted again, immediately dropping low to the floor where the air was marginally clearer. The Navy had trained me for this, maybe not specifically for this, but for survival in impossible situations. Stay low where there's oxygen. Control your breathing. Move with purpose, not panic. I knew every inch of our house layout. Every room, every doorway, every piece of furniture. I'd walked these floors hundreds of times. I crawled through the living room on my hands and knees, past our wedding photos hanging on the wall. I could see them melting in their frames, the glass bubbling from the intense heat. Past the couch where we watched movies together. Past the coffee table, where Emma put her feet up after long days at work. Then I heard the most beautiful sound imaginable in that moment, a weak, desperate cough from somewhere upstairs. The staircase was partially collapsed already, fire eating through those wooden steps like they were made of tissue paper. Each step groaned and cracked dangerously under my weight, threatening to give way completely and send me plunging into the flames below. But I didn't care about the danger. I would have crawled through the gates of hell itself to reach Emma. I found her in our bedroom, the room where we'd spent lazy Sunday mornings reading the paper, where we'd painted the walls together a soft cream color, where we'd talked about baby names and our dreams for the future. She was lying unconscious on the floor near the window, her body crumpled in a heap. I could see her pregnant belly beneath her smoke-stained dress. Her beautiful, long, dark hair, the hair I loved running my fingers through, was singed and burned. Terrible burns covered both her arms where she'd obviously tried to protect herself from the fire. "Baby, I've got you both," I said, my voice cracking with smoke damage and emotion as I carefully lifted her into my arms. She felt so light in my arms, too light, like she'd lost weight, like the baby was the only thing giving her any substance at all. I held her against my chest as carefully as I could, one arm supporting her upper body, the other arm cradling and protecting her belly where our daughter was. Getting back down those stairs was like descending straight into hell. The fire had spread even more in the few minutes I'd been upstairs. The heat was absolutely unbearable, burning through my uniform, blistering my skin. I could actually feel my flesh cooking, but the pain seemed distant, unimportant. All that mattered was getting Emma out, getting Hope out, getting my family to safety. The stairs had completely collapsed by the time I tried to go back down. There was no way through. So I did the only thing I could do. I kicked out a first-floor window, twisted my body in mid-air to take the full impact of the fall, and crashed through with Emma cradled protectively in my arms. Glass sliced through my uniform and into my skin. I felt it cutting me, felt the warm blood, but I held Emma close and rolled when we hit the grass outside, putting as much distance as possible between us and that burning house. "Help!" I screamed at the neighbors who were still just standing there like this was some kind of show. "Somebody help us! Call an ambulance! Now!" Finally, people started actually moving instead of just staring. The fire trucks arrived moments later, sirens blaring, lights flashing. But I didn't care about saving the house anymore. That was just wood and drywall and material possessions. None of it mattered compared to the woman in my arms. I cradled Emma's head in my lap, my fingers frantically searching for a pulse in her neck. Please, 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 I kept thinking. It was there. Faint, weak, irregular, but there. She was alive. "Stay with me, Emma. Please, baby, stay with me," I begged, my voice breaking. "Hope needs you. I need you. We need you to fight." Her eyes fluttered open for just a brief second, unfocused and confused, struggling to see me through the smoke damage. "Jake," she breathed, barely a whisper, her voice strangled and painful. "Karen, she did this." Then her eyes rolled back in her head, and she passed out again, her body going completely limp in my arms. The ambulance ride felt like the longest 20 minutes of my entire life. Longer than any combat mission, longer than any training exercise, longer than any difficult deployment. The paramedics worked on Emma with focused, professional intensity, checking her vital signs, checking the baby's heartbeat with a portable monitor, starting IV lines in her arms, and placing an oxygen mask over her soot-covered face. I sat crammed in the corner of that ambulance, covered from head to toe in burns and soot and blood, some mine, some Emma's. The paramedics kept trying to treat my injuries, but I refused everything until I knew my wife and daughter were going to survive. "Sir, you really need medical attention," one of the paramedics kept insisting. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with concerned eyes. "Those burns are quite serious. You're going into shock." "Not until I know they're alive," I said firmly, my eyes never leaving Emma's face for even a second. At the hospital, they tried to separate us. Multiple nurses and orderlies tried to take me to a different examination room, a different floor, away from Emma. I refused to move, planting my feet and crossing my arms. I wasn't leaving her. Finally, an older nurse with kind, understanding eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun gently took my arm. Her voice was soft but very firm when she spoke. "Soldier," she said, looking me straight in the eye. "Your wife needs emergency surgery right now. That baby is in serious distress. The doctors need space and quiet to work, and they need to focus 100% on saving your family's lives. You can't help them if you collapse from smoke inhalation, or if your burns get infected and you end up in the ICU yourself. Let us treat you so you can be there for them when they need you." That got through to me. She was absolutely right. Emma and Hope needed me healthy, needed me able to be there for them through whatever came next. I let them lead me away, but only after I leaned down and kissed Emma's forehead one more time. Her skin felt hot with fever and burns. "Fight, baby. Fight for Hope. Fight for us. I'll be right here waiting. I'm not going anywhere. I promise." The next 6 hours were absolute torture. And I say that as someone who's been through Navy SEAL training, who's survived combat missions in hostile territory, who's been in situations where death seemed not just possible but highly probable. Physical pain I could handle. But this was worse than anything I'd ever experienced because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't fight back, couldn't take action, couldn't control the situation. They treated my burns, second degree covering both my arms and most of my back. They gave me oxygen through a mask for the smoke inhalation damage to my lungs. They cleaned and carefully stitched up dozens of cuts from the broken glass. But the physical pain was absolutely nothing at all, compared to the mental agony of not knowing whether my wife and daughter were alive or dead. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, a doctor in surgical scrubs approached me in the waiting room. His face looked exhausted and grave, and I couldn't read his expression at all. My stomach dropped to the floor. "Mr. Mitchell," he said. I stood up so fast that the IV pole they'd hooked me up to almost crashed to the floor. "How are they? Please tell me they're alive." "Your wife is alive," he said, and I felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in hours. "We had to perform an emergency C-section to save both of them." "The baby?" I asked, terrified of what he might say next. He paused, just for a second, but it felt like forever. "Your daughter is alive, but she's extremely premature and in critical condition. She's in the NICU right now on full life support. Your wife has severe burns covering approximately 30% of her body, significant smoke inhalation damage to her lungs, and we've had to place her in a medically induced coma to help her body focus entirely on healing." The world seemed to tilt sideways. I had to grab the wall for support because my legs suddenly felt weak. Can I see them?" I managed to ask. "Yes, of course. But Mr. Mitchell, I need you to prepare yourself mentally. Your wife's recovery is going to be very long, very painful, and very difficult. As for your daughter, I won't sugarcoat this. The next 72 hours are absolutely critical. We're doing everything medically possible, but I have to be honest with you. It's touch and go right now." They took me to the neonatal intensive care unit first. Through the thick glass window, I saw her for the first time. My daughter Hope. So impossibly, heartbreakingly tiny. Hooked up to what seemed like dozens of tubes and wires and monitors and machines. Her little chest was rising and falling so rapidly as she struggled and fought for each breath. 3 pounds, the NICU nurse told me softly. She was an older woman with gentle eyes and steady, capable hands, the kind of nurse who'd clearly seen everything. But I can tell you right now, she's a fighter, just like her daddy, I'd be willing to bet. Then they took me to Emma's room in the ICU. This was the woman I'd loved since we were teenagers in high school. The woman who'd waited patiently and faithfully for me through 3 different military deployments, never once complaining. The woman who danced with me in our kitchen and sang off-key to the radio and somehow made our house feel like a real home, no matter where we were stationed. Now she lay still and broken in that hospital bed. White bandages covered her arms and parts of her face and neck. A ventilator was breathing for her, the machine making steady, rhythmic whooshing sounds. Heart monitors beeped. IV pumps hummed. The room was filled with the sounds of machines keeping her alive. I took her hand so carefully, so gently, terrified that I might somehow hurt her even more. "I'm here, Emma. I'm here now, and I'm never leaving again. You hear me? I promise you. You fight. You come back to me. Come back to Hope. She's so beautiful, and she needs her mama." I stayed right there all night long, holding her hand, talking to her, begging her to wake up, telling her about the flowers I'd brought that were still sitting in my abandoned car somewhere, telling her all about Hope and how tiny and beautiful and perfect she was, making promises about the future we were going to have together. The police showed up the next morning. 2 detectives, a man named Rodriguez, who looked like he'd seen way too much in his career, and a sharp-eyed woman named Chen. They found me still sitting in Emma's ICU room, unshaven, exhausted beyond words, still wearing those hospital scrubs because my uniform had been completely destroyed in the fire. "Mr. Mitchell, we need to ask you some questions about the fire," Rodriguez said carefully, his tone gentle. I looked up at them, and apparently they saw something dangerous in my eyes because Rodriguez immediately softened his approach even more. "Before she lost consciousness yesterday, your wife said a name to the paramedics. The name was Karen. Can you tell us anything about that?" Everything suddenly clicked into place in my mind, like puzzle pieces finally forming a complete picture. Karen Hutchinson, president of our neighborhood's homeowners association. The woman who'd made Emma's life absolutely miserable for the past 3 months while I was deployed overseas, unable to protect my wife from her harassment. "Karen Hutchinson," I said, and my voice came out cold and flat. "She lives 4 houses down from us on Maple Grove Lane, White House with the rose garden she's so proud of." "Can you tell us about your history with Ms. Hutchinson?" Detective Chen asked, pulling out a small notepad and pen. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts through the exhaustion and pain. "My wife and I moved into Maple Grove about 2 years ago. Everything was perfectly fine, completely normal for the first year and a half. Then Karen Hutchinson got elected president of the HOA about 8 months ago, and that's when everything changed." Rodriguez nodded for me to continue, settling into the uncomfortable hospital chair next to me. "She started finding violations everywhere," I continued. "And I mean everywhere. Our grass was supposedly half an inch too long by her measurements. Our mailbox was apparently the wrong shade of black, not quite dark enough to meet her standards," she claimed. "We put up our Christmas decorations one day too early, according to some rule buried deep in the HOA bylaws. Every single day, there was something new to complain about, some new supposed violation." Detective Chen was taking careful notes while I talked. It got dramatically worse when I deployed overseas 6 months ago. Emma was here alone, pregnant, dealing with terrible morning sickness, working full-time at her job as a school teacher, and trying to maintain the house by herself. Karen didn't care about any of that, didn't show even a shred of human compassion. She'd come by with an actual ruler to measure our grass. She'd leave violation notices taped to our front door daily, sometimes multiple times a day. The fines started piling up fast. $50 here, $100 there, $200 for some completely made-up violation. It was relentless. My hands had clenched into tight fists, remembering it all, and I had to consciously force myself to relax them. Emma wouldn't want me losing control right now. She'd want me focused on helping her and Hope. "Emma has always been too kind for her own good, too patient with people," I said. "She tried her best to comply with every single ridiculous demand, even though it was absolutely exhausting her. But then about 3 weeks ago, Emma decided to plant a small vegetable garden in our backyard. She was so excited about it. She wanted to grow organic vegetables for the baby, wanted Hope to eat healthy, homegrown food from the very beginning. The garden wasn't even visible from the street. It was completely in the back, behind our privacy fence where nobody could see it. Let me guess, Rodriguez said, his jaw tightening. Karen had a problem with it anyway. Oh, she had a big problem with it, I said bitterly. She claimed it violated some obscure HOA rule buried somewhere in the bylaws about unauthorized landscaping changes. She demanded that Emma dig up and remove the entire garden within 24 hours or face a $1,000 fine. Emma was 7 months pregnant, exhausted, emotionally drained, and she'd finally had enough. She snapped. She told Karen no, told her to take her rules and shove them where the sun doesn't shine. Despite everything, despite the fear and pain and anger, I felt a flash of fierce pride thinking about my sweet Emma finally standing up to that bully. Karen went absolutely ballistic, I continued. She launched a full campaign to force us out of the neighborhood entirely. She'd stand outside our house at all hours of the day, taking photographs, measuring things obsessively with her tape measure. She'd call the county building inspector with fake code violations. She got the other HOA board members to vote for increasing our fines to completely ridiculous amounts. Emma would call me on video chat from Japan, crying, begging me to come home early, but I couldn't. I was right in the middle of an important classified operation. I couldn't just leave my unit. Detective Chen looked up from her notes, her expression sympathetic. Did Ms. Hutchinson ever make any direct threats toward your wife? Yes, I said, and the word came out hard and sharp as a knife. Emma actually recorded one of their confrontations last week on her phone. Karen told her point blank that she would make absolutely sure Emma regretted ever moving to Maple Grove. She said she would find a way to eliminate the problem of our family living in that neighborhood. Those were her exact words, according to Emma. Eliminate the problem. Do you still have access to that recording? Rodriguez asked, leaning forward with interest. It should be on Emma's cell phone, assuming the phone somehow survived the fire, I said, though I seriously doubted anything had survived that inferno. I haven't been able to look for it yet. Rodriguez and Chen exchanged a meaningful glance, the kind of look that told me they were about to drop another bombshell. Mr. Mitchell, Rodriguez said very carefully, choosing his words, the fire investigators have already done a preliminary examination of your property. The fire started in multiple locations simultaneously, all around the perimeter of your house. They've found clear, unmistakable evidence of accelerant, gasoline that was deliberately poured around the exterior of your home. This wasn't an accident. This was arson. Premeditated arson with clear intent to cause harm. I already knew that, of course. Emma's last conscious words before passing out had told me exactly what happened, but hearing it confirmed officially, hearing it stated out loud by the police, made the rage inside me start to boil over. Someone had deliberately, intentionally set fire to my home with my pregnant wife trapped inside. Someone had tried to murder my entire family. We pulled and reviewed your neighborhood security camera footage, Chen added, consulting her notes. We have clear video of Ms. Hutchinson's vehicle driving slowly past your house 3 separate times in the hour before the fire started. We also have footage of her vehicle parked down the street with a direct, unobstructed view of your house right at the time when the fire began. Are you going to arrest her? My voice came out deadly calm, which somehow seemed more frightening than if I'd been yelling and angry. We're bringing her in for formal questioning this afternoon, Rodriguez said. But Mr. Mitchell, I need you to promise me something important right now. I can see in your eyes exactly what you're thinking. I've worked with enough military guys, especially special operations guys, to recognize that look. Don't do anything that's going to land you in federal prison while your wife and daughter desperately need you by their sides. He was absolutely right, of course. As much as the warrior part of me, the part that had been extensively trained to neutralize threats and protect innocent people, wanted to find Karen Hutchinson and make her pay in ways the legal system couldn't possibly deliver, Emma and Hope needed me. They needed me here, alive, free, and able to take care of them through their recovery. I'll let you do your job, Detective Rodriguez, I said carefully and deliberately. But you need to make absolutely certain she never sees the outside of a prison cell again for the rest of her natural life. The week that followed was hands down the hardest week of my entire life. And I say that as someone who's successfully completed Navy SEAL training. one of the most brutal military training programs in the world. I've survived multiple combat missions in hostile territory. I've been in life-threatening situations where death seemed not just possible, but probable. But nothing, absolutely nothing in my entire life prepared me for the soul-crushing experience of watching my wife and newborn daughter fight desperately for their lives. At the same time, I sat helplessly on the sidelines. Little Hope stayed in the NICU, her tiny, fragile body fighting incredibly hard to develop lungs that simply weren't ready yet for the outside world. Premature by almost 2 months, she weighed barely 3 pounds. I spent countless hours sitting beside her incubator, talking to her, singing her the lullabies Emma had already picked out and practiced during her pregnancy. The NICU nurses, angels, every single one of them, told me that premature babies could definitely hear their parents' voices, that familiar sounds and voices actually helped them fight harder to survive and thrive. "Your mama's fighting too, baby girl," I'd whisper through the plastic incubator walls, watching her impossibly tiny chest rise and fall so rapidly. "She's so incredibly strong, the strongest person I've ever known. And you inherited her strength, I can already tell. You also got my stubbornness, so I know you're not giving up. We're Mitchells, and Mitchells don't quit, ever." Emma remained in that medically induced coma, lying completely still and unresponsive in her ICU bed. The doctors patiently explained to me that the coma was medically necessary. Her body needed to focus every ounce of energy on healing the extensive damage, not on managing the excruciating pain that would otherwise be overwhelming. But seeing her so still, so utterly unlike my normally vibrant and energetic wife, was absolute agony. It was like she wasn't really there, like I was sitting next to a stranger. I split my time between their 2 rooms, absolutely refusing to leave the hospital for any reason whatsoever. The nurses brought me food that I barely touched. My stomach was too twisted up with worry to eat much of anything. Other SEALs from my unit came by regularly to visit, offering quiet support, bringing supplies I might need, sometimes just sitting with me in companionable silence when words wouldn't help. My commanding officer even came personally, all the way from the base, to tell me I could take as much time as I needed, that my family came first, and the Navy would be there when I was ready to come back. On day 5 after the fire, Karen Hutchinson was formally arrested by police and charged with attempted murder, arson, and a long list of other serious felony charges that would put her away for the rest of her natural life if she were convicted. On day 6, Hope's medical condition finally stabilized somewhat. She was still listed as critical, still heartbreakingly and frighteningly tiny. Still, the neonatologists started using phrases like cautiously optimistic and showing steady improvement that gave me the first real glimmer of hope I'd felt since this nightmare began. On day 7, something truly miraculous happened that I'll remember for the rest of my life. I was sitting beside Emma's bed like I had been for days, reading aloud to her from her favorite romance novel, the paperback she'd been halfway through when I left for deployment 6 months earlier. The doctors said that coma patients could sometimes hear voices which might help them find their way back. So I read to her, chapter after chapter, hoping she could somehow hear me. That's when I felt it. The slightest pressure on my hand where I was holding hers. So faint and subtle that at first I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I was so exhausted I was starting to hallucinate. "Emma?" I leaned forward immediately, my heart suddenly pounding hard in my chest. "Baby, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." Another squeeze came, stronger this time, unmistakable and deliberate. I frantically hit the call button for the nurse, not daring to take my eyes off Emma's face for even a second. "Come on, baby, come back to me. Come back to us. Hope needs you. I need you." Her eyelids started fluttering, moving for the first time in 7 long days. Then they slowly opened, unfocused at first, confused and disoriented, then gradually found and focused on mine. I watched confusion transform into recognition, transform into sudden fear. "Jake," she whispered, her voice barely audible and rough from the ventilator tube they'd removed 2 days earlier. "I'm here. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere," I said, tears streaming freely down my face. I didn't even try to hide them or wipe them away. "You're safe now. You're in the hospital. You've been in a coma for 7 days. Her hand moved immediately, instinctively, to her belly, and panic flooded her eyes when she found it flat and empty instead of round and pregnant. "Hope!" It came out as a desperate, heartbroken cry that tore my heart in two. "She's alive, Emma," I said quickly, squeezing her hand. "Our daughter is alive and she's fighting. She's in the NICU. She's tiny, so tiny, and she's on life support, but she's alive and the doctors say she's strong." Emma started sobbing, and I held her hand as carefully as I could while the medical team rushed into the room to check her vitals and assess her condition. Dr. Patel, who'd been our guardian angel through this entire nightmare, actually smiled with genuine joy. The first real smile I'd seen from him. "Welcome back, Mrs. Mitchell," he said warmly. "You gave all of us quite a scare." Over the next several hours, the medical team thoroughly examined Emma, carefully explained the full extent of her injuries, and told her in detail about the emergency C-section they'd had to perform. Every piece of news was another emotional blow for her to absorb and process. The burns would leave permanent visible scars covering 30% of her body. The significant lung damage would take many months of intensive therapy to heal completely. The long, painful, difficult recovery that stretched out ahead of her with no shortcuts. The fact that she'd almost died, that Hope had almost died, that we'd almost lost everything. But Emma was alive. She was awake. She was here with me. And when they finally wheeled her bed down to the NICU so she could see Hope for the first time since the traumatic emergency delivery, when she got her first real look at our tiny daughter fighting in that incubator surrounded by tubes and wires and monitors, both of us just cried together. We held hands and cried tears of relief and fear and overwhelming love. "She's so incredibly small," Emma whispered, her voice filled with wonder and pain and fierce maternal love all mixed together. "She's a Mitchell," I said softly, wrapping my arm very carefully around Emma's shoulders, being extremely mindful of her bandaged burns. Small but mighty, just like her mama. Emma stared at our daughter through the incubator's clear plastic for a long, quiet moment. Then her expression gradually hardened with determination and anger. "Karen did this," she said, her voice turning cold as ice. "I remember everything now, every single detail. I saw her outside the house through the window. I watched her pour something around the foundation, gasoline, I realized later when I smelled it. I tried to run, tried to get out through the doors, but they wouldn't open. She'd blocked them somehow from the outside. The fire started so fast, Jake, everywhere at once, all around the entire house. I couldn't breathe. The smoke was so thick. I kept thinking, I thought we were both going to die. She's been arrested," I told her firmly. "She's in jail right now, and she's going to prison for the rest of her miserable, pathetic life. I'll make sure of it." "Good," Emma said fiercely, her hand pressing flat against the incubator as close as she could possibly get to touching Hope. "Because if she had succeeded in killing our baby Jake, if she'd taken Hope from us, not even God himself could have saved that woman from me." That's when I knew with absolute certainty that my Emma was going to be okay. She was scarred, changed forever, traumatized by what she'd been through. But she was still fundamentally the same fierce, strong woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago in high school. While Emma slowly began her painful physical recovery process, the police investigation into Karen kept uncovering more and more disturbing details about the true depth of her obsession and madness. Detective Rodriguez returned to the hospital about a week after Emma woke up from the coma. He looked tired and worn out, but also grimly satisfied with what his team had found. "We executed a search warrant and went through Karen Hutchinson's home and personal computer with a fine-tooth comb," he said, pulling up a chair next to Emma's hospital bed. "What we found was Well, it was deeply disturbing, to put it mildly. Emma, sitting up in bed with her burns freshly bandaged, immediately tensed. I took her hand and held it gently. "What do you mean by that?" I asked. "Mrs. Mitchell, you need to understand something important," Rodriguez said heavily. "You weren't Karen's first target, not even close, not by a long shot." "What?" Emma whispered, her face going pale. "Karen Hutchinson has been serving as HOA president for exactly 8 months, Rodriguez explained. In just those 8 months, 3 other families were systematically harassed until they were forced to sell their homes at a loss and move away from Maple Grove. 3 separate families before yours." "3 families?" Emma repeated in shock. "We found extremely detailed files on her personal computer," Chen added, pulling out her tablet to show us. "Surveillance photographs taken secretly with telephoto lenses, extensive notes about their daily schedules and routines, comprehensive lists of violations she'd completely fabricated out of thin air. She was methodical, obsessive, and deliberately cruel in her approach." "There's more," Rodriguez said grimly. "We found concrete evidence that Karen committed insurance fraud by filing multiple false claims over the past year. We found financial documents clearly showing she'd been systematically embezzling money from the HOA dues account, and we found her personal diary." "Her diary?" I asked. "She wrote everything down in meticulous detail," Chen said, her professional mask slipping slightly to show genuine disgust. "Every thought, every plan, every observation. Her hatred of you, Mrs. Mitchell, was intensely personal and went very deep. You were young, pregnant, beautiful, happily married. You had a husband who was a decorated war hero serving his country. She wrote in multiple entries that you flaunted your perfect life and that you needed to be taught a harsh lesson about respecting proper authority." Emma's hand started trembling in mine. Chen continued reading from her tablet. "The diary entry from the actual day of the fire is particularly damning as evidence. She wrote, and I quote, 'Today I will cleanse the neighborhood of the problem family. If the pregnant one dies in the fire, it will serve as a powerful lesson to all the others about the consequences of disrespecting HOA authority and my leadership.' I wanted to punch something. Wanted to find Karen and make her physically feel every single ounce of pain and suffering she'd deliberately caused my family. That diary provides clear proof of premeditation," Rodriguez explained. "Combined with the security camera footage showing her vehicle, the physical accelerant evidence at the scene, and an eyewitness who saw her purchasing multiple large gas cans at the hardware store on the morning of the fire, the district attorney says this is the strongest criminal case he's personally seen in over 20 years of prosecution." "What about the HOA itself?" I asked. "Did the other board members know what she was doing to us?" "The other board members all claimed they didn't know the full extent of her harassment campaign," Rodriguez said. "We're still investigating whether that's actually true. But here's something that might interest you both. The HOA's insurance company has already denied any coverage for your losses. They're claiming Karen acted completely outside her official authority." "So we lost everything and got nothing?" Emma's voice rose with anger and despair. "Actually," Chen said with a small smile, "a lawyer named Margaret Whitmore contacted us. She specializes in HOA abuse cases. She saw your story on the news and wants to represent you pro bono. She believes you have an excellent case against both Karen and the HOA. Karen's criminal trial began 4 months after the fire. By then, Hope was finally home from the hospital. Still small for her age, but healthy and thriving beautifully. Emma had endured multiple painful skin graft surgeries and countless hours of physical therapy. I'd taken early retirement from the Navy to care for my family full-time. We attended every single day of that trial. The prosecution built an absolutely devastating case. They showed surveillance footage, presented Karen's damning diary entries, and brought in expert after expert. When Emma took the stand to testify, describing how she'd begged Karen to stop the harassment, how she'd seen Karen pouring gasoline around our home, there wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom. After just 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty on all counts. Karen's carefully blank expression finally cracked, transforming into shock and then pure rage. She actually started screaming at the jury and judge, blaming us before security had to physically restrain her. Emma buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing with relief. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge showed absolutely no mercy. You attempted to murder a pregnant woman over a vegetable garden. I hereby sentence you to 50 years in prison without any possibility of parole. 50 years. Karen was 63 years old. She would die in prison. The civil lawsuit against the HOA was settled out of court for $2.3 million. With that money, we bought a beautiful new house on 3 acres outside the city. No HOA, no neighbors close enough to complain about anything. Emma designed every inch of it exactly how she wanted. She planted an enormous vegetable garden. She painted the shutters the brightest blue she could find. She hung wind chimes everywhere that some people might consider tacky, but we absolutely loved. Hope grew and developed. Her premature birth left some lasting effects, but she hit every milestone eventually. Her first word was Mama. Emma's scars faded somewhat with treatment, but would never completely disappear. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at them sadly in the mirror. "You're beautiful," I'd tell her every single time. "These scars prove you're a survivor. They mean you protected our daughter with your own body." We also established the Hope Mitchell Resilience Fund with money from Karen's sister, Patricia, who came to apologize for her family's silence. The scholarship fund has since helped dozens of military children attend college. 5 years after the fire, our family had grown to include a son named Jack. Emma published a book about surviving trauma that helped thousands of people. I started a nonprofit helping veterans transition to civilian life. One evening, I found Emma planting roses in our garden, dozens of beautiful red roses. "What are these for?" I asked. She smiled. "These are my revenge roses. Karen was so proud of her perfect rose garden. I heard they bulldozed her house and garden completely. So I'm growing roses, better roses, in a bigger garden, in a house filled with love and laughter. That's my real revenge, Jake, living better than she ever did." We drove past Maple Grove once, just out of curiosity. Karen's old house was gone, replaced by a community garden. Our old lot stood empty with wildflowers growing. "Do you ever think about buying it back?" Emma asked. "No," I said firmly. "Our memories are in our new home, with our kids, in our garden, in our wide open spaces where nobody tells us what color our shutters can be." That night, holding Emma on our back porch while Hope and Jack chased fireflies in the yard, she asked me, "Are you happy?" "I am," she answered her own question. "I'm scared. I'm changed. Some nights I still wake up smelling smoke, but I'm happy. We survived, Jake. We built something beautiful from literal ashes." "Karen tried to destroy us," I said. "She failed completely." Emma took my hand. "She thought she could break us. Instead, she made us unbreakable. That's real justice, choosing joy every single day, loving hard, and refusing to let hate win." In the distance, Hope squealed with laughter. Jack clapped his tiny hands. Emma smiled, and even though her scars were visible in the porch light, all I saw was her incredible strength. We'd won. We'd survived. We'd built a beautiful life from the ashes. And that made all the difference.